important and why we believe it's important, and we can discuss. Use of the subregistry itself, that those of you may be interested in working on this registry but who are still not centers, Tanja will address your questions and join.
I think Licia's internet connection just got lost because she's not here anymore.
Okay.
Or
And maybe we can hear
Licia?
she's back.
You're back?
Yes, I'm here. I never went away.
Okay, because you went off your video and you do not share your screen anymore. Can you start sharing your screen again?
Oh, let me see what's the problem. But I don't know what happened. Let me see. I can see Zoom, but I cannot get in. Let me close everything. Oh. I will start again from the beginning.
Licia, you're frozen again. I think we have a problem here.
She was again in the waiting room. Now I let her in. I think she just joined again.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but very welcome everybody, and sorry for this problem. We were just about to introduce ourselves as the steering committee of the IgA Nephropathy IgA Vasculitis Subregistry, held by Jürgen Flöge, myself, with the great help of Eyal Rahmani from ERKReg, the coordination office in Heidelberg. Then we nominated recently the external advisory board, held by Manuel Praga from Madrid, Sigrid Blomberg from Stockholm, Sweden, and Timo Linsky from Paris, France. So with all of them, we will try to run the registry and try to exploit the best potentiality of the registry. So the IgA nephropathy is the last sub-registry which joined all the other sub-registry dedicated to specific disease and aimed at holding specific projects. So why do we need the IgA nephropathy and IgA vasculitis sub-registry? Mainly because IgA nephropathy is one of the most common glomerulonephritis worldwide, probably the most common, with genetic and acquired issues still to be explored. There are a number of patients through all ages, but still we don't know whether in children and in adults, so this is really the same disease. The disease is long-term net history, and the landscape of endpoints is changing very rapidly recently, and so we can probably explore the long-term natural history in different ways. In the last years, the prediction tools were made available, but this offer basically a short-term visual And maybe the potentiality of the registry, a prospective registry with the patient will offer other possibilities to better follow the long-term follow-up. In the last 15 years, a lot of change for this disease. Many trials were run with interesting results, and several new treatments are being on the scene. So now the difficulty will be soon how to choose the right one. And we hope that with the help of gathering large amounts of data in a systematic way will be an instrument of great help. On the other side, IgA vasculitis is a rare protein disease with some similarities and some differences with primary IgA nephropathy. In childhood, we all know that may be a benign auto-resolving disease, while in adults it's severe and progressive. And still here, we don't know whether it's the same disease or not. Differently from IgA nephropathy, if you go through the literature, you'll find mostly retrospective cases, small cohorts, and case reports. More reviews than data, actually. And one of the aspects which can become now very important is that IgA vasculitis nephritis is an exclusion criteria at enrollment in most of the trials. And so we still don't know whether the experience with the new drugs, which is positive for many new drugs, and IgA nephropathy will work the same. And so now single cases or more uncontrolled cohorts are appearing, and the potentiality of the registry also in gathering this data will probably be of great help. So the IgA nephropathy in our vision is a tool for all the ERKReg community and for the stakeholders, a tool to answer research questions we can submit to the board of the registry and the board of the subregistry for epidemiological description of new cohorts of IgA nephropathy where biopsy is mandatory, and IgA vasculitis with nephritis where renal involvement is mandatory, but still the renal biopsy can sometimes not be performed. The registry is prospective, but patients with the diagnosis of the disease after 2015 can be enrolled in the subregistry because we believe that recent cases may have a different follow-up and a different count than very old cases. We could compare our subregistry with other existing registries like RADAR or ERKReg-IgAN, and we'll see about that. Update the description of population of patients as support for drug registration. This is an important point, and the industry, pharma industry, is very interested in having this data, and this can provide accelerate approval for some drugs. We could use the registry to validate available instruments such as the IgA nephropathy prediction tool, which has been evaluated and validated for adults and children in IgA nephropathy, but still not used for IgA vasculitis, and can be used to also to select population of patients to address to new trials, and particularly for children, where children are offered the possibility to be enrolled in trials usually much later than the adults, and IgA vasculitis nephritis, which is generally excluded, as I said, to trials. Then there's the possibility to use the Omero platform for pathology studies. We will not go through very much through this because this is just a possibility which is not been set up yet, but we can figure out that could be a potential use in the future. And all the other ideas you may have or you may want to explore. So now I give you the word to Jürgen Flöge, who will continue in this introduction on the topic, and then I will talk again about IgA vasculitis nephritis specificity. Thank you. I think Jürgen is mute.
Yep. Now I'm unmuted. Sorry about this. And you should be seeing my screen now, right? Okay. So welcome everybody from my side as well. It's a great new initiative, and I very much look forward to working with all of you in this project, because I believe a lot of things are moving in IgA nephropathy. And a lot of things are still very, very unclear in IgA nephropathy, and this is a wonderful chance to answer some of the questions via the registry. So what I would love to do in the next 20 minutes or so is to go over some seemingly simple things that we believe we know in IgA nephropathy, where I am not so certain we know, and where we definitely need new data. And maybe this short introductory lecture can make you think, because we are very much open right now to research questions that all of you have and that we can possibly address with this registry. So,
Jürgen, if I interrupt you, you need to switch the screen. It's the Referentenansicht.
okay, let me do that. Now, okay?
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, so this is from a publication that Franz Schäfer has chaired, the IgA prevalence in Europe, 0.5 cases per 2,000, which makes it well in the rare disease definition of the European Union, and which led to the fact that IgA nephropathy is now officially an orphanet. This, of course, is very important for lots of special rules when it comes to drug approval and things like that. But we're not certain about this. I've been involved in another analysis recently, and this is about to be published soon. The prevalence of IgA nephropathy has an absolutely linear relationship with how much biopsies you do in a country, and you can see that if every citizen has a kidney biopsy, apparently in Finland, then Finland has the highest prevalence of IgA nephropathy. So it's really something that we do not know and where we still need better data. And you can see the marked heterogeneity of IgA prevalence throughout Europe. But as I said, this is directly related to how liberal your biopsy policy is. And very clearly, the new guidelines will ask for an even more liberal biopsy policy. So this map may be changing quite dramatically. Why does IgA nephropathy evolve? We have probably all heard about the 4-hit hypothesis, where hit number 1 is increased occurrence of galactose-deficient IgA in serum. Then you produce IgA or IgG autoantibodies to this galactose-deficient IgA that deposits, and bang, you have IgA nephropathy. Seems simple, seems easy. Well, we don't know this. For example, why is there increased galactose-deficient IgA in serum? You and I, we all have this, except hopefully you and I don't have IgA nephropathy. Are we certain that you need to produce galactose-deficient IgA autoantibodies? I'm not certain. And in fact, there are something like 20 mouse models where there is no autoimmunity involved, whereby simply raising IgA levels, you do develop IgA nephropathy or what looks like IgA nephropathy in a mouse. Do we exclusively have galactose-deficient IgA in the mesangium? And there will be a study coming out that will really question the relevance of galactose-deficient IgA1 in the pathogenesis of IgA nephropathy. So even that we're not certain of. And other trivial questions. Why do patients with IgA have so much hematuria? How does it evolve? Why, if there are really holes in the glomerular basement membranes, why doesn't everybody have crescentic IgA nephropathy? Or maybe this is a reason why so many have crescents in the biopsy. And just to illustrate this, these are mouse models of IgA nephropathy. What you can see here is that no matter what you do to the mouse, whether you express human or mouse IgA, the moment you overexpress it, 2-fold, 50-fold, you do develop something that looks by all means like IgA nephropathy, mesangial-proliferative disease, C3 deposition. Many of these have proteinuria, many have hematuria, and some even develop end-stage kidney disease. And this is clearly in the absence of an autoimmune reaction to the IgA. So, personal opinion, IgA to me is more a deposition disease than a true autoimmune disease. And obviously, clarifying this will have dramatic consequences on how we treat IgA nephropathy. This is what the KDIGO guidelines say in terms of clinical management. Assess risk, and the emphasis is on the IgA prediction tool. And you can use this to assess prognosis, but not a particular treatment regimen. This still be tested. And then there's this terrible sentence, and I'm afraid it will not change in the guideline update. There are no validated prognostic serum or urine biomarkers in IgA nephropathy. Now, to illustrate the dilemma we are in, this is a slide taken from RaDaR, the Rare Disease Registry in the UK. And the big insight here was that even if you have proteinuria below 1 gram per day, which was considered safe, and where we said in 2021, this is your treatment goal, it's not safe. And people do lose kidney function. And to illustrate the dilemma of the prognostic tools, this is the time period covered by the IgA prediction tool. So if you calculate the risk of, let's say, somebody with 0.8 grams proteinuria per day, the bluish line here, you would come to the conclusion that the risk is about 10% for kidney failure in the next 6 years. And your patient would be happy. If you tell that same patient your risk in 15 years is 50%, that patient is not happy. That patient will do whatever you tell them to do. So assessing prognosis is still a challenge. And for example, we need to validate this prediction tool for much longer periods of time because of the emphasis to patients that they have a high lifetime risk. And we are talking youngish adults, don't forget that. A study from Sweden, I believe Sigrid Lundberg is central in this, looking at albuminuria. We still don't know whether proteinuria or albuminuria is the better predictor or whether they are both the same, but very clearly albuminuria, like proteinuria, is a high risk factor for kidney failure. And you have major adverse kidney events going up almost 5-fold if you have a baseline UACR of greater than 2. But what is striking about the Swedish study is a look at the annual GFR decline. Overall, it was -3 mils per minute per year. And if your proteinuria is very low, it's essentially the so-called physiologic GFR loss. If it's very high, it's much higher. But keep these numbers in mind for a second and remember 3 mils in Swedish patients. We looked at the IgA patient subcohort in the German GCKD cohort. This is a 5,000 patient cohort that has now been followed for more than 10 years. And we looked at the 421 IgA patients in there with a follow-up of 6.5 years in everybody. They were fairly typical, mean age 50, mostly men, long disease duration in the past before they entered this cohort. The initial urine albumin creatinine ratio was low, 0.4 grams per gram. GFR was low as well, 53. And what we found is that a very potent predictor for a kidney endpoint is albuminuria, no surprise here. And it's also to some degree a predictor of major cardiovascular events, but much weaker. The only thing that predicted there is diabetes. But again, if you look at the eGFR loss in this cohort, it's fairly striking. Urine albumin creatinine ratio of greater than 1.4 minus 3 mils, even lower than in Sweden. And if you go to these lower categories, you have a very slow GFR loss. Now, here we have looked at albuminuria again. If you convert that roughly to UPCR, this is where most trial patients would belong to. Most trials had demanded a UPCR of 0.8 grams or higher, and most ended up at around 1 to 1.5 grams per gram. So in the German GCKD cohort, these patients would have an annual GFR loss of minus 1.5 to minus 2.3. Pretty low, and not really compatible with the radar GFR loss. And then it gets even funnier. If you look at all the clinical trials that have been going on, and you just take the control arm, placebo or RAS blocker therapy, you see, look at this GFR loss. The best one is our Stop IgA cohort, pretty much exactly like what we see here. The second best is Protect, where everybody was on high-dose irbesartan, but even high compared to the GCKD cohort. And then every other trial had a much, much higher progression rate, which is very unexplained and which to me would imply that maybe RAS blockade hasn't been used to the full extent in these other trials. So this is a very trivial question, but of major relevance, of course, for pharmaceutical industry. How quickly does IgA nephropathy progress under today's conditions? Next issue, we all like to look at the MEST score, but the MEST score still is not perfect. And Licia just told you we have a chance here to look at pathology slides. Look at this. This is a comparison of local and central Oxford pathology. The good news is that in most cases, the local nepropathologist was in line with Oxford. The bad news is that the local nephropathologist saw in particular M&E lesions in many cases where Oxford didn't see anything. And here it gets really scary. The local nephropathologist saw a crescent where the people in Oxford didn't see a crescent. And that, of course, has major implications to treatment again. The only thing that's very consistent and very reproducible here is T, tubulointerstitial fibrosis. And that, of course, is expected, because if you think of a kidney biopsy cylinder, 90% is tubulointerstitial, and this will not change rapidly. So this is what we had in terms of treatment so far. This is taken from the 2021 IgA nephropathy guideline. We had maximal supportive care, and we were somewhat uncertain about glucocorticoids. Some used it, many didn't. But supportive care, again, let me go to this slide again. You have already seen it. These are the control arms of contemporary trials. That to make it into the trial, everybody had to be on what is called maximum tolerated or allowed. Then you add placebo to that. So placebo on top of a RAS blocker. Look at these GFR losses. They are really high. There are 3 trials that stick out: Stop IgA, the Protect trial, and this Chinese trial. And here we have taken 6 months to optimize supportive care. These patients all were on a maximum dose of irbesartan, and these patients all received losartan, raising the suspicion that maybe in the trials where they used placebo, maybe not everybody had been on optimal RAS blockade. Things may change further with the advent of SGLT2 inhibitors, which in IgA nephropathy in this meta-analysis reduced GFR loss by, or the risk of kidney failure by about 50%. Corticosteroids, we don't know. Stop IgA, no benefit. 3 retrospective European trials, no benefit. Testing saw benefit, so did this Chinese trial. But all the trials were very much in consent that the adverse event rate doubled. And there's an interesting dichotomy between Asians responding seemingly better compared to Europeans. Again, maybe ERKNet can give us some insight here as well. And finally, as Licia already mentioned, IgA nephropathy is in a major transition phase as we get more and more treatments. And we are just updating the KDIGO guidelines. And the good news is I have the final version finally on my desk this morning. So it will be published in summer. And something like this will be the key algorithm in there, with one arm saying this is what we used to call supportive care, but manage CKD, manage blood pressure, reduce glomerular hyperfiltration, manage cardiovascular risk, and we're getting more drugs here with an SGLT2 and sparsentan. And then at the same time, that's a major treatment change, address IgA nephropathy, the immune side, reduce pathogenic forms of IgA, reduce glomerular inflammation, and we can do this. This will change a little bit in the final version, but I cannot go into this right now. And then there are some drugs that seem to work in particular in Asian populations with no or little evidence that they work in Europeans. So again, a lot of question marks here. And this is where I believe the IgA registry of ERKReg will have a beautiful role in addressing some of these issues. So with that, I can give over to Licia again. Licia, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Jürgen, for this wonderful introduction, raising more doubts than certainties. And so this is why the registry, we believe, it can be a useful tool. So we'll continue and we'll present you a few things about IgA vasculitis again. Okay. You should see on share screen. So, while for IgA nephropathy, lots of studies have been settled in these years, and IgA, as Jürgen said, epidemiology varies a lot. For IgA vasculitis, nephritis is even worse because you can see numbers are very widespread, and the difficulty with IgA vasculitis nephritis often is that the beginning of the disease onset is spread along weeks or even months or sometimes years. And so it's even difficult to identify when the disease really started. It is the most common vasculitis in children, and this we know, but still it's a rare disease with a seasonal behavior. Some years we see a lot of cases like this year's, and we haven't seen cases for years. And so there's still a lot of things that we still have to explore. The incidence is not actually that low, as we the figures reported goes from 0.8 to 1.8 for 100,000 persons per year, developing nephritis in adults in 20 to 50% of the adults. And in children, the disease is quite more common as a systemic disease, but with nephritis, again, 30 to 60%. So we still have more questions than answers, and so we believe that this subregistry could be a good potential. If we explore the right side of the registry dedicated to IgA vasculitis, we see that in the core ERKReg-Registry, over 20,000 glomerulopathies, IgA nephropathy accounts for almost 1,500 biopsy-confirmed cases, while IgA vasculitis is now in February, 385 IgA vasculitis cases, intended cases with kidney involvement, and 61 were already enrolled in this subregistry. So a small percentage, but as I'll show you, this accounts for about 1/4 of respect to primitive primary IgA nephropathy. But the cases are increasing. IgA vasculitis with the nephritis, as I told you, is a rare disease with mostly retrospective studies. And if you go through the literature, you will hardly be able to find papers reporting more than single centers or small multi-centers. This is a multi-center study from the United States, put into account to 5 years of children with 6 months of follow-up. And they were able to put together 128 children, so quite a small cohort, with a very difficult description because only half of them performed the biopsy. They had different presentation. UPCR decrease along the period observation period. The NGFR went up and down. So it is not even clear the threshold for proteinuria and duration. Some children were treated with steroids and many others treatments altogether. So, and if you go through the literature dedicated to IgA vasculitis with nephritis, particularly with children, you'll be able to find most of the papers like this because many treatments applied without any control studies. And so we believe that the registry in this particular field will be able to add lots of interesting data and control data in a more systematic way. This is the ERKReg core registry. And if you consider IgA vasculitis, this dotted line, you see that through ages, since the start of the activity of the registry, the enrollment has been pretty constant. But after the sub-registry, if you follow this line, there was an increase of enrollment, a rapid increase of enrollment, and we really hope that this can continue because the sub-registry, as we will see later, gathers also many more detailed aspects of clinical therapy and pathology data that will be very helpful to answer specific questions that are still unanswered for both IgA nephropathy and particular IgA vasculitis. If you consider IgA vasculitis enrollment by country, are the last data obtained in February on the core registry, so 385 cases. You see France is the top enroller, but of course we cannot at the moment say if this is a reporting bias or different epidemiology. So that's why we need to enroll more cases and try to dissolve this difference. You can see the yellow. The orange are pediatric cases. Some centers like the French report lots of pediatric cases. Other countries like Italy also have adult cases. Spain, as Italy, has quite a significant number of adults, and other cases, other countries are still not reporting. So we really need to have a more widespread representation of the disease and the potential of a prospective registry. We believe that on an epidemiological point of view can have a strong value. These are a few data that we retrieved with Eyal on what's already there from the core registry. As you can see in blue, you have the pediatric cases of IgA vasculitis nephritis, and as expected, the top age is school age, as we say. So the mean is 8.7 years, and the median is almost the same. But cases of IgA vasculitis are spread out all over ages, even in ancient, very old people with different outcomes. The follow-up is quite good, even from the core registry. You see the mean follow-up is significant. Most of the cases have at least 5 years of follow-up. Then there's a decreasing length of follow-up for many cases, but we believe that we can retrieve the historical data and maybe implement the data belonging to those preliminary cases and add the details to improve the follow-up time. For IgA vasculitis nephritis, in fact, most of the reports have a very short follow-up, and even large studies have follow-up, median follow-up of only a few years. As you saw, also for IgA nephropathy, maybe we have to have a look on longer follow-up, and the registry might be a good tool to do this. If we go through CKD stages at last visit, as you can see, children here are in orange. Most of the children at last visit have a good renal function, but we still have also transplant and CKD4 cases, even for children, while the adults are spread out all over for all cases. And if we will evaluate the proteinuria distribution at last visit, as you can see, most of the cases have a proteinuria which is below 1 gram, but as we have seen for IgA nephropathy, we cannot nowadays no more consider safe enough to be satisfied with the treatment when we achieve 1 gram of proteinuria per day in all ages. So most of the cases will be below 1 gram, but still at last follow-up, particularly in children, they have very active. Children mostly have a very active onset with nephrotic range proteinuria, others less, but still they can continue having proteinuria even at not secure, not safe levels enough for long. The survival obtained from the data already present in the core registry shows that children have quite a good survival for kidney survival here, for survival to renal failure, while the adults have a progression and the heart hazard ratio is 8.6. So adults are definitely progressive. The research questions for the subregistry would be dedicated to therapy, to histology, to long-term outcome for childhood onset, and there are lots and lots of questions that we could be answered, because if IgA nephropathy is still obscure, IgA vasculitis is even more obscure. If we can consider that children, even very severe onset in children, can heal completely and never recur again, while others progress slowly and others have a very rapid progression and very bad outcome quite soon. What's in the literature to compare what we are doing? This is the QIgN. The QIgN is studied a multi-center registry actually in the United States. As we can see, they enroll IgA nephropathy and IgA vasculitis as we are planning to do, and we are actually doing. But at the moment, as you can see, they have here, this was published in 2018, so maybe now they're growing numbers, but IgA vasculitis were only 161 cases between 112 pediatric and about 50 adults, same age at the onset and at the biopsy, similar as Europe, and as you can see, the distribution of age is similar to what we have in Europe. The QGN actually is quite similar to our registry because the enrollment is within 5 years of kidney biopsy. They include both IgA nephropathy and IgA vasculitis, in all cases of kidney disease, pediatric and adults, and the data collection is quite similar. Moreover, they have a comprehensive biobank for the participants, which at the moment we don't have. And they have an emergency standardized central digital pathology repository, which is similar to our Eumeros platform. So we can probably do something quite similar and provide a good European interface. Which would be the potential research question? One of the questions I launched when I started and then I entered within the ERKNet network I proposed an evaluation study, a validation study conducted within ERKReg of the Oxford classification in adult and children in IgA vasculitis nephritis. The paper, a core global study, was published last year concerning the histologic and clinical factors associated with kidney outcomes in IgA vasculitis nephritis. It was a huge effort to gather the series. As you can see, 262 children were finally included in the studies. The children and the adults, they all had a very comprehensive data set, and the biopsies were centrally revised, which is this is actually one of the how can I say, the positive things of the studies. All the data on therapy were gathered, but still in a not very punctual way. For the study, for the analysis, the statistical analysis, we decided, since most of the children and the adults received immune suppression, over 80%, to include in the analysis only those who were treated with immune suppression. And considering a statistical method which identify Latin class mixed models, the two classes were identified. One had an initial improvement and then a later decline in GFR and a higher risk of renal failure. And this was associated with the histology MET score E1, while the other class was certainly has a different behavior with a stable disease and was histologically characterized mainly by fibrous crescents without active changes. If we go through the data, these are some data. So these are the immune suppressed, all the evaluated cases received immune suppression. And then, as I told you, we can identify two subpopulations. One, which is very stable, which is the sclerotic, mainly sclerotic, and the other, which is the one we have probably observed most in children, who has an improvement at the beginning, and then they lose a loss of GFR after 5 years of first observation. So our point of view at 5 years certainly will not be sufficient to give a prognosis. And in these persons, as you can see in red, is the one, the group with an initial improvement followed by the decline. This is the proteinuria. Proteinuria first decreases, then will be stably low for some time, and then will increase afterwards. And probably the follow-ups need to be continued afterward to be able to catch a progression. In fact, this population, which had an initial improvement, had subsequently, along years, after 10 years, as you can see here, a 50% decline of GFR, as similar to what's been observed in IgA nephropathy, while the other, the stable cases, kept stable for years. If we go through the aspects, the histological aspects and the association with the clinical data, we can see that those mostly probable to follow in the first initially improving, then declining afterwards were the younger, before 18 years old, with a reduced GFR at the onset, with extrarenal systemic disease, and mainly E1 lesions, even though in a cross reading among pathologists, the reading of E1 lesion was the one who had the most problems of uniformity, while fibrous crescents mainly are sort of marker of stabilization or possible stabilization of the disease into a stable follow-up. Another point in IgA vasculitis nephritis, at least in children, is that the timing matters, and this was the German studies, the GPN study that demonstrated that if you wait to perform biopsy for months, you'll find more chronic lesion than active lesion. This was quite reasonable, but they were able to demonstrate that waiting for months will certainly hamper the follow-up and the possibilities to have a disease that could be finally cured. So crescents depend certainly on timing of biopsy, and chronicity index, as we know, may influence negatively the outcome. One of the points that has been pointed out in the German, but also in other studies, is smoldering low-grade proteinuria, which correlates with chronic lesion, which occurs after the initial observation, where all the efforts are concentrated to treat the active lesion, while the smoldering grade proteinuria is mostly neglected. This was confirmed also in a Polish experience. Here they demonstrate that the kidney biopsy in children with IgA vasculitis, nephritis, and nephrotic proteinuria, if it's delayed after 21 days, substantially gives a higher risk of finding sclerotic lesion and even tubulointerstitial lesion if delayed after more than 1 month. So biopsy should be performed within 3 weeks in cases of nephrotic proteinuria to find treatable acute lesion and avoid possibly chronic lesion. This is the message, and this message was derived from a cohort of 106 children. But certainly the possibility to have a much larger and multinational cohort through the registry maybe can give us some information also on these aspects. Going to the French study, one important study by Timolins, which is our external advisor in the registry, was a demonstration that class 2 ISKDC, so the middle class, they were not the worst, they were not the best, but mild histological lesion considered mild, and so for this reason, these were children who received less treatment since considered with a favorable histology, and they did not have a nephrotic proteinuria, were actually those going worse than those with a more severe onset who received more treatment and had a larger possibilities to go into remission. So watch out from the middle cases and from mild cases, which may be neglected. So as we said, for IgA nephropathy, we still don't have very clear which are all what we know for years as the 4-hit hypothesis. This is true for IgA nephropathy, and it's even more for IgA vasculitis nephritis. So if they accept that the two diseases may have similar triggering aspects and similar pathogenetic mechanisms, still it's not clear what differentiates the two diseases. And what is really lacking is clinical trial experience in IgA vasculitis nephritis, even with the use of drugs with the consolidated use as is inhibitors and immune suppressors and steroids. And now, when new drugs as budesonide, anti-APRIL, complement inhibitors, and even the new glomerular sparing glyphosine, sparsentan, and endothelin receptor antagonists are appearing, as well as mineralocorticoid antagonists. In IgA vasculitis, only case reports of very small series are appearing, and so our idea on how to use this drug is based actually on very, very few control data. So we believe that the registry may be a help to gather altogether data which are difficult actually to retrieve from a control trial because the disease has a difficult point of onset, differently from IgA nephropathy, and it's really different also in presentations, so rendering control trials very, very difficult to apply. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Licia and Jürgen. So I wanted to first share the preliminary findings that we have about IgA nephropathy from our registry. This is the findings were submitted to the upcoming ERA conference, and it's based on the core registry, so it's not specific to the sub-registry. And hopefully once we have the sub-registry, we'll be able to do a more detailed analysis. So our objectives were to explore the relationship of proteinuria with lifetime risk of kidney failure in patients followed in European reference centers and recorded in ERKReg. And we analyzed all the patients in the ERKReg registry who were registered until the end of last year, until the end of 2024. And we only included patients with a biopsy-proven IgA nephropathy, and we saw that we had about 1,270 patients, for 884 adults and 386 with childhood manifestation from 10 European countries and 49 units. We also created a subgroup called the DAR subcohort, which I'll discuss it later, but it's a subgroup of patients with a proteinuria greater than 0.5 grams per day or eGFR less than 60 at any time. And if we look at the distribution of patients by country, we can see the majority of the patients are from Italy, followed by Spain, France, Belgium, Ireland, and a country with patients with less than 10 patients, are gathered under other. And if we look at the enrollment from the time of diagnosis, we can see that about 50% of the patients were enrolled within the first year. The age at diagnosis had a bimodal distribution with the median age at diagnosis of 33, and the Q1 was 17 and the Q3 was 49. And we had follow-up duration of 6 years from diagnosis. This is basically the duration of the center. And 240 patients progressed to kidney failure and 7 patients died. When we look at the age at kidney failure or death, it's 45. The median was 45. And when we look at the survival, so this is kidney survival or death, we can see that the median survival was 35.9 years from the time of diagnosis. And here it's displayed by adult manifestation and childhood manifestation. And when we compare the two, we see that the adjusted hazard ratio is twice as much for adult than in comparison to childhood manifestation. And you can see here also the 10 and 20-year survival. When we show the results classified by the severity of proteinuria, we can see as well that the greater the proteinuria is, then the more likely it is to lose the kidney. Here it is displayed by the hazard ratio, and even here in the 0.5 to 1 grams per day, it was statistically significant with about 3 times as likely. And then we wanted to look at the RADAR study, which was mentioned here today as well. And the RADAR study is an analysis of the long-term outcomes of IgA nephropathy based on the UK National Registry of Rare Diseases. And this is the official infographic of the RADAR study. It's quite a large study with about 2,300 adults and 140 children. They had a lot of similar features, but you can see straight ahead that the median age of diagnosis was different. I will discuss the proteinuria later. But when we look side by side at the survival curves, we can see that their survival differs greatly from our survival. And this group on the right is the RADAR inclusion group, which also depicts more severe patients as their inclusion criteria. And even by including those more severe patients, the survival was 28 years versus 11 years. So it's quite a great difference. And even when we look at the classification by proteinuria, we can see that it's the 10-year survival in our registry was better than the radar study. So we saw that the kidney survival was associated with disease manifestation at adult age and greater time average proteinuria, that even mild proteinuria, less than gram per day, had notable impact on kidney function prognosis. And our outcomes depict a more favorable prognosis for most patients compared to the findings of the British radar study. The question is, why do we have such different results? So there are several explanations. Not all of them are covered here, but first of all, maybe we have some survival bias in our data, because as you know, ERKReg enrolls patients mostly of outpatient clinics, which could be healthier in comparison to a national registry. We have more childhood manifestation cases. So we have 30 versus 6%. And for an unknown reason, the eGFR of childhood manifestation at the time of diagnosis was a lot better in ERKReg in comparison with the radar study, even though the age of diagnosis was very similar. You can see that the eGFR at diagnosis, the median eGFR diagnosis, was 105 versus 76 at the radar study, whereas the adult manifestation was very similar. That, of course, doesn't explain why the adults, even in our registry, declined at a slower rate. So those are questions that we would have to discuss later when we write the article. But I think it's a very promising start. So now I want to discuss the training and the need for the registry. So before I start with the training, just because not everybody here is an ERKNet member or have experience with the registry. So we have the core registry, and then we have sub-registries. So in the core registry, we collect general data, general meaning that's relevant to most kidney diseases. And then in the sub-registries, we collect specific data that is relevant for that disease, including more modules that I will discuss later. And IgA vasculitis and nephropathy are the latest addition. So we have the steering committee, including Licia and Jürgen, with the external advisory board, Manuel Praga, Sigrid Lundberg, and Tim Olinsky. And this is a bit more up to date than the slide from before, but very similar. So this is the data according to yesterday. And it grew a bit, not by a lot, it's just 1 month. But we have right now about 390 patients with IgA vasculitis in the registry, of which 20% have been enrolled, and 1,640 IgA nephropathy. Almost all of them are biopsy confirmed, and just 10% enrolled. And over time, we can see that there is still, since the official launch date in October, we can see that there has been an incline in the number of enrolled cases, and we hope to even have more cases in the future. When we look at the visits, we can see that the number of visits documented per patient for most patients is only 1, which is something that we want to change, especially when we look on the right side, when we see how many years they've been in the registry and how many visits the patients have. We can see that most of them, especially after 4 years, don't have a lot of visitors, still at a median of 2. So this is also something that we would like to help and improve. For IgA vasculitis, it's a bit better. We can see that most patients have a documented visit, and a lot more cases are have consecutive visits. When we look at the age of diagnosis, so biopsy-proven IgA nephropathy is much more prevalent all over the years, whereas IgA vasculitis is mostly in the first 15 years of life. And enrollment data that was, I think, covered already, so I'll skip that. By country, so IgA nephropathy is mostly Italy, Germany, Belgium, France, Spain, and Ireland. Whereas from IgA vasculitis, we have more data from France, Germany, Italy, Turkey, Belgium, and Spain. And the inclusion criteria. So IgA nephropathy in the subregistry requires at least one clinical criterion, which is episodic gross hematuria, persistent microhematuria, or progressive kidney function impairment, and histopathology showing evidence of dominant or dominant IgA deposition, and no evidence of SLE, systemic lupus. And IgA vasculitis requires palpable purpura with clinical or histopathological criteria. So the clinical criteria are at least two: arthritis or arthralgia, abdominal pain, and urine protein creatinine ratio greater than 0.2 grams over gram, or hematuria, or histopathology demonstrating leukocytoclastic vasculitis with the predominance of IgA deposition in a skin or kidney biopsy. And kidney involvement, either proteinuria, hematuria, or histopathological evidence is mandatory. And we are assigning patients based on their initial presentation. The follow-up interval in the registry varies. So it's either every 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, depending on the following criteria. So for 3 months, we are collecting data for patients with a rapidly progressive disease course, severe proteinuria, or after an initiation of new medication. And 6 months for patients within the first year of diagnosis after a change in dosage of an existing medication with moderate proteinuria, and patients with a milder decline in eGFR and increase in protein creatinine ratio. For all other patients, we collected the default interval for all patients in the registry, which is 1 year. And the intervals are automatically calculated. You will see it later when we discuss how the data is actually collected in the registry, but you don't have to remember how often on when you have to do the follow-up. And just to clarify, the number of required visits per year is between 1 to 4. The data that we collect is basic data, visit data, medications, and extracorporeal treatments, meaning plasmapheresis. We will discuss them in more detail later. And from the frequently asked questions, we will collect retrospective visits up to 5 years. The number of visits per patient, as we discussed, is between 1 to 4. How do we know when to enter retrospective visits? So this is a new feature in the registry. So you will be able to see when a visit is missing, and you will be able to enter within 45 days plus minus 45 days from that expected date. And you do that only by clicking on selecting the date. We will discuss that now. And I just wanted to also mention the registry trainings that we do in ERKNet. So we do that once per month, and you can register using the following link. You can also go to our website, and there is a link there where you can register. And now I'm going to go over the registry itself and the way that the website works. So on the left side, you have the data, and this is ERKReg, of course. And on the left side, you have the menu where you can select data entry. And after that, you can either add a new patient or modify an existing patient. On the right side, you have the option to filter subregistries. And in this case, I've selected IgA vasculitis or nephritis. And once I do that, I see a subgroup of patients. And now about the basic data or new patient. So to enter the basic data or create a new patient, I do either press the new patient or I click on the patient and a new submenu appears where I have the option to select the basic data. Once I enter the basic data, I have a list of subregistries, and there I can assign the patient to the IgA nephropathy. I've left the user feedback survey on, so you will be able to submit more feedbacks in the future. So after you do that, there are other fields that needs to be filled. So the center unit, you have the option to either select pediatric or adult. And for the ERKReg registry, you have to fill in the consent when the consent was obtained. And then you have to select yes for the inclusion in the sub-registry. And then there are 3 more consents that are optional and you must select according to the patient's preference. After which we have the option to enter the basic information of the patient, including sex, date of birth, ethnicity. When the date of first signs of symptoms, this is an optional field, and the date of first presentation to the center. And then whether or not renal diagnosis is established, in our case, it's yes. How do we assign the diagnosis? Is by selecting the diagnosis, and then we have the option to select glomerulopathies, and from glomerulopathy, we can select IgA nephropathy. For IgA vasculitis, it's a bit more complicated. So you can go through the following tree structure that will lead you to the IgA vasculitis. But I think it's easier to just select the search diagnosis by name, enter IgA vasculitis, and then you can select it from there. Then we have the diagnostic survey. The diagnostic survey is the which methods were used to establish the diagnosis. Some of them are mandatory, which are clinical examination, which will later prompt for blood pressure, biochemical evaluation, which will later prompt for creatinine and proteinuria, and kidney biopsies mandatory for IgA nephropathy, but optional for IgA vasculitis. They're automatically selected, but you have option to fill in more. And then we have the presentation at time of diagnosis. We have the option to enter the height and weight, the blood pressure, and then hematuria, where we have microscopic or gross hematuria or no hematuria. Proteinuria, which we have non-nephrotic or nephrotic or none. Kidney function change, then we have stable, acute kidney injury or RPGN. And this is just for the presentation. And then for the IgA vasculitis, we have the symptoms associated with IgA vasculitis, which needs to also be filled in. Specifically for joint involvement, you have arthralgia and arthritis. For the rest, it's just yes, no questions. For the trigger prior to diagnosis, if you select yes, you have the option to select within 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, and then the type of symptom. Upper respiratory tract infection, skin infection, vaccination, allergy, drug exposure, or other. After which we enter the serum creatinine at first presentation. And then we have the comorbidities, including HIV, celiac, inflammatory bowel disease, liver cirrhosis, familial Mediterranean fever, rheumatic disease, including psoriasis, or other. We have inhabit smoking status, including active smoker, past smoker, non-smoker, or unknown. And when you select active or past smoker, you have the option to enter the PEC years. We received a lot of feedback about that, so we are going to modify it to start year, stop year, and daily smoking amount, which is how many packets do the patient smoke per day. After which we have surgery. In this case, it's only tonsillectomy, where you have to mention yes, no, or unknown. And when yes is selected, you have to enter the date of tonsillectomy. And for the biopsy, you have to enter the date of kidney biopsy. And then you have the Oxford classification, whether or not it's available, and if it's available, to enter the MESTC score. And for IgA vasculitis, you have the option to enter the ISKDC classification. It's optional unless Oxford is unspecified. And we also have questions about C3, whether or not it was present, C4D, whether or not it's present, and then immunoglobulins, IgA dominant, IgG dominant, or IgA, IgG codominance. There are extra questions about the time of biopsy, including proteinuria at the time of biopsy. You have different options to enter. And then thrombotic microangiopathy, it's a yes/no question. Immunosuppression prior to biopsy, also a yes/no question, and RAS inhibition at the time of biopsy. The reason they're also included here is they're part of the prognostic score. So now let's discuss the visits. And this is including the new feature. So when we're talking about visits, you have 3 options: either to add a new visit, edit a previous visit as displayed under previous visits, or add a missing visit. So you can see this is a new feature that we introduced yesterday. And if you hover with the mouse over the missing visit date, you can see the range. And the missing visit should be entered within that range. So once you click on it, it opens a window with the time window where you could enter the visit. And once you select the visit, it automatically creates a new window with a new visit with the entered visit date. And now about the data that's collected in the visit form. We collect the height, weight, and blood pressure. And then we have a question about systemic signs, where it's also unknown. It's if you don't know the option. And then if you select yes, you can enter which systemic signs were present. Then we have the serum creatinine. And here we have something that's very important in this registry, which is the multiple serum creatinine or UPCR test in the last 6 months. If you select yes, it will open the following window. You can see that there is an option for an info. It shows you the following information, where we collect 2 more samples. So we collect the 6 months, before 6 months, and before 3 months. And then you're able to enter the serum creatinine value or the UPCR value. And once you exit the visit, if according to the new data, it triggers it triggers a new visit or a new missing visit, you will see that once you exit that window. And then it could ask you for another visit retrospectively. And then we have the blood parameters. So all of these are optional. So you have the LDL, serum bicarbonate hemoglobin, and serum IgE. If you don't know them, you can leave them empty. And then we have the quality and performance indicators, including proteinuria, which you have several options. There are 7 different methods of checking the proteinuria. And once you select one of them, you have to enter the date and the result. And then you have the hematuria, where you can select microscopic or macroscopic gross hematuria. If you select microscopic, it also asks you for the value. And then whether or not the patient is receiving RAS inhibition. And then it goes over the other lowering blood pressure lowering treatment. So if you select yes, and ask for the number of blood pressure medications other than RAS inhibitors, basically beta blockers and calcium channel blockers. And then we check if, during the interval a new biopsy was performed. And if you select yes, it triggers the following question: when was the biopsy performed? And then the date of biopsy, serum creatinine, the time of biopsy, the proteinuria at the time of biopsy. And then we have the option to enter the Oxford classification or the ISKDC as before. And we also have the thrombotic microangiopathy, which is also available in the basic data. And we have the medications module as well for that subregistry, where we collect information about the start date, stop date, and dosage. And we collect data about specific medication, not all medication that the patient receives. And so it's RAS inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitors, endothelin blockers, systemic steroids, immunosuppressants, complement inhibitors, and anti-CD38. And here we have the extracorporeal therapies, plasmapheresis, where we enter the start date, number of sessions, and stop date. And the last thing I want to discuss is the histopathology server. So it's still not available. Hopefully it will be available very soon, but it will also be available for IgA, nephropathy, and vasculitis. And it allows us to collect the images of scanned slides directly in the server in a very high resolution, which allows us to actually compare it later and run analysis on that later. And hopefully it will be available soon. So that's actually the tutorial of how to use the system. And you can email me here for more specific questions, or you can scan the QR code and it will automatically load the new email message available to send to me. And I would like now to address questions if you have any. Sorry, I'll stop the screen sharing.
So thank you, Eyal. It was a great presentation, and I think lots of inputs to be addressed to all our participating members and newcomers. Thank you.
I have a question. We discussed this yesterday in Aachen. Claudia Seikre tells me she can enter patient data from the time of their agreeing to become ERKReg patients. But what she cannot do, and what would be most interesting, is entering data that go like 10 years back.
Was that specific for IgA? Because I think that's true for the core registry.
No, this is specific for IgA, where of course we often have old creatinine data, and we could really go for long periods if we can enter these data.
Agreed. So the idea is to allow even prior I know that for the core registry, it's not allowed, but for the subregistry, it should be allowed, and we will address that.
Okay.
I think the most important aspect was the introduction of the missing visits, because so far we only collected prospective data, and now with the retrospective visits, it's very important to make it easy for the users to know when a visit is missing, and it was important also to let them enter that visit without a lot of fuss.
Yeah, there's a first question in the chat. Tony Bouts is asking whether consent is needed for the subregistry.
So
and
it's
who
covered
translates.
under the general consent for ERKReg. So it should be covered. Needs local approval, so it requires to be an ERKNet member, either internal or external, and Tanja will go through that shortly. And who translate the language of the country? So the current registry is only in English. So it's currently not translated. We're working on a new version of the registry, which will be multilingual and would also make the data accessible for the patients themselves. There is another question. Can a patient be included in several sub-registries? For example, IgA subregistry and RTA registry? And yes, we allow for the inclusion of multiple sub-registries. If you remember the screen from before, you have the option to tick which sub-registries are included for that patient. And once the patient is assigned to a certain sub-registry, the questions are specific to those sub-registries in that case. So if you're assigned to multiple sub-registries, we'll have questions relevant to both.
Of course, it would be unusual if a patient has two diagnoses, IgA nephropathy and RTA.
Are there more questions or topics you would like to discuss? Some fields that may require adjustment, clarification, anything that would make the data entry easier?
I was thinking, Eyal, if maybe we can send out a sort of schedule or when the data will be retrieved for the next analysis, so everybody can make an effort to fill in as much as possible for that day. Maybe before the meeting in Leuven, we can fix out another data retrieval or something, or otherwise sort of, I think it would be useful for people to know when you are downloading the results, the data, and analyze them so that we can make some efforts to fill in.
Okay, I think we can agree on a date.
So before whatever, and try to put as much as possible so we can analyze this. I think we have quite a good core data, but if we implement something, we can go have enough material to write something and to analyze properly.
Yeah.
You know, the numbers
2 weeks ahead of the meeting would be good.
Okay, so I assume at the end of this month probably would be reasonable. What do you think, Franz?
Or we can even plan to concentrate on IgA nephropathy first and try to accomplish the study we are doing, and then move to IgA vasculitis afterwards, so we can have some more time for filling the other, and just to have our sort of research schedule, research plan to be shared with everybody, so that we can.
So I think we will discuss it, and then we can publish it to the ERKNet centers.
I think that would be useful just to know, because we have many priorities all the same. We have to prioritize something. And if we know that we are concentrated in doing something, maybe it's encouraging to work on that instead of on other fields.
Okay. Okay, so maybe if there are no more questions, we can go on to the last part, which is how to become an ERKNet member.
Just a second. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Eyal, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tanja Wlodkowski, and I'm one of the project managers at ERKNet. And in the next few slides, I want to show you how you can become an ERKNet and ERKReg investigator. Just a few facts on the core registry, which you haven't heard today yet. We have launched the ERKReg registry in 2019, and we have currently more than 20,000 patients enrolled, and we are covering more than 300 author codes. We have now more than 100 participating centers in 27 countries with a very good enrollment rate of 100 new patients per week and an annual follow-up rate, which you have heard is our default follow-up rate of 75%. And we have these 8 disease-specific sub-registries active. What will be your benefits to join ERKReg and one or more sub-registries? You will contribute to a facilitated patient cohort identification for research and clinical trials. Your center can access the benchmarking and quality monitoring system, meaning that you can compare your center performance to a set of key performance indicators compared to the ERKNet average to see how your center is doing for improving patient care. And you can also collaborate to research opportunities, and you will have access or will have the possibility to request data from ERKReg. Importantly, ERKReg is not just open to ERKNet members, but also to all interested sites globally. So what you need to do, the first step is contacting us and express your interest in joining ERKReg and the sub-registries. You can use either email address erkreg@erknet.org or contact@erknet.org to get in touch with us project managers. And we will provide you with all the necessary paperwork. First, it's the informed consent forms for the patients. These were developed in collaboration with the ERNs and EJPRD for the use in ERN registries. And they all comply with GDPR. And we have them available in all European languages for adult patients and for parents or legal representatives. We also need to conduct a data sharing agreement between Heidelberg University Hospital and the participating center, which outlines the legal and practical framework ensuring the data protection rules. Step 2 will be obtaining ethical approval and signing the agreement. So the first step is that you need to submit your the informed consents to your institutional review board and secure the approval to ensure the ethical compliance. We have generic informed consents, which leave space for editing against your national or local rules or regulations. And the second is that you need to submit the data sharing agreement to your legal department for review and later on also for signature. It's very important to have the data sharing agreement signed before we can actually create you an account, which is the next step. You get a ERKReg credentials and the training. So once the data sharing agreement is signed, we can create an account for your center and all the ERKReg editors. So it's very important that all editors have their own account to trace back who was doing what. And the account allows you to manage and enter the patient data securely. Eyal mentioned before that we offer training for ERKReg editors. So we have monthly basic trainings to, for starters or for refreshers to familiarize with the system, to introduce the basic data entry menu. We offer also regular advanced training sessions for more experienced users and also for the subregistries, such as we did today. And the dates and registration forms can be found on our ERKReg website. We have also a number of useful documents on the website which will help you and facilitate the ethical application and also the data entry itself. Step 4 is actually starting enrolling the patient. So first is obtain the informed consent, ensure that all your patients have signed in the informed consent form, and also important to keep a local list of your patients to re-identify them later, because we from the ERKReg project management cannot trace back the patient because it will be pseudonymized. When entering the data, we recommend to have 1 or 2 dedicated editors per team who keeps track on the patient entries and also tracks when the next visit is due and so on. And we have a user guide and a FAQ sheet which helps enrolling the patients. I listed this twice. And we also ask to comply to our data management scheme. So we have the annual visit update. And in case of IgA, we have also more frequent updates, but the default is an annual update. And we will also send regular query reports annually, where we ensure to have a really clean data set and to update all the data which is missing or unclear. This is how you can join us on ERKNet, social medias, and our email addresses. So if you have any questions, happy to answer it. Seems not the case.
We have to advertise the possibility to join the registry, even for non-ERKNet center, and so maybe we have to keep refreshing the interest also on social media for people who might join later. So, are there any questions on the suggestions or research questions that anybody can propose?
I suggest you think about it a little bit, and if there are any research proposals or questions that feel are of interest, send us an email. It's easy to find us, and we really look forward to your proposals.
Okay, I think we have interesting data to analyze, and we can start and retrieve data pretty soon to do something good. What Eyal presented today, I think is very interesting, and before DTA, before ERA, I think we can explore and investigate deeply what the data already we have. If something is missing, maybe we can go back to centers and ask for the missing data. If you think that something is missing, we can just go center by center asking them if something you think is critical, I think can be retrieved somehow.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we have an early finish of the session. If
We've
there are
been
no
really
more
fast.
questions.
Yes,
We've been super fast.
we can donate 45 minutes of lifetime. Enjoy.
Super. Very valuable. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you.
All right. Ciao.